Hi, this is Denise, your Area 50, Western New York, Panel 72 delegate to the General Service Conference. In this segment, I'll be reviewing the items from the Trustees Committee, who looked at 7 agenda items, had 6 committee recommendations that went to the floor for full vote, and 5 additional committee considerations. So let's go. The first recommendation from the Trustees Committee was to present the slate of 21 trustees for the next year. As you can see on this list, the 7 on the left are our Class A non-alcoholic trustees, and on the right are our 14 Class B alcoholic trustees. That's why you see just a first name and a last initial presented for anonymity reasons. So just to back up, what happens is there's 8 regions in the United States and Canada, 2 in Canada, 6 in the United States, and on a rotating basis, every 4 years, a trustee will be elected for 2 of those regions. In this particular year, resumes were presented from the corresponding delegate areas in the Pacific region and in the Eastern Canada region. And then during the conference, what happens is those delegates representing the areas that comprise those regions have a third legacy procedure election. And in this year, Riley K. came out of the hat from the Pacific region, and Joyce S. came out of the hat for the Eastern Canada region. So what happens is those 2 trustees trustee nominations from the election become part of that list of trustees that are presented on the slate. Then the full conference has a vote on that particular slate, and that's a spiritual vote. And then what happens is the following day after the conference, so the Saturday after the conference, the existing trustees have a vote and vote in their successors, and this is the slate. So the conference had its spiritual vote, and we voted 120 to 3. My vote was yes. That's substantial unanimity. So this is the slate of 21 trustees that were presented to the board meeting, and I'm happy to report that that trustee slate did pass, and we'll see the same slate presentation and approval by the conference for the AA World Services Board and for the Grapevine Board. And a quick commercial break from the Trustees Committee. So our region that Area 50 is in is called the Northeast Region, and we are one of the 2 regions that will be electing its next regional trustee at the 73rd General Service Conference. So we are going to elect a successor to our current Northeast Regional Trustee, Francis G. The Northeast Regional Trustee will serve 4 one-year terms immediately following the General Service Board meeting that's right after the 73rd General Service Conference next year. So each of the 18 areas, such as the Area 50, can nominate a candidate, and our deadline for doing so is January 1st of 2023. You do not have to be a past delegate to be a trustee or even a nominee for trustee, although most of the Class B regional trustees have served as delegates, but it's not a requirement. So I'm recommending that interested candidates be presented at the Assembly for Area 50 on September 20th of 2022, and that we could potentially vote if we have more than one nominee or one candidate for nominee to our Assembly in November. So we are now back from our commercial break to the Trustees Committee recommendations that went before the full conference. And so we voted on the slate of officers from the General Service Board. You can see that the first 5 names there are trustee names. Some are Class A non-alcoholics with their last names listed, and some are Class B trustees that are alcoholic. And the last 2 names are General Service Office employees, and that follows the same notation in terms of last names. So those 7 were voted upon and received substantial unanimity to be the officers for the General Service Board, and those will be moving from kind of this spiritual approval that we did at the conference to the legal approval, which happens at the General Service Board the Saturday following the conference.
So the next recommendation came from another agenda item, which is a standing agenda item each year at the conference. And this is the presentation of the slate of directors for the AA World Services Corporate Board. And these 9 individuals were presented. The full conference voted on this. They received substantial unanimity, and that was kind of the spiritual approval, if you will. And then on the Saturday following the conference, April 30th, this went for kind of the legal approval with the board from AA World Services. And this is your new slate of directors for the next year.
And likewise, the conference voted on the slate of directors for the AA Grapevine Corporate Board. And these are the 9 directors that were approved. And that was our spiritual approval by the conference. And the Saturday following the conference, the AA Grapevine Corporate Board met and did the legal approval of the slate of directors. And they became the directors of the Grapevine immediately. So the next item for which the Trustees Committee had a recommendation for the full conference was an item that had been looked at by all of the conferences since 2018, and it was to put together a procedure for a partial or complete reorganization of the General Service Board, the AA World Services, or the AA Grapevine boards. And I just want to be clear that this was not an item to go ahead and reorganize them. It's an item to approve a procedure in case we ever needed to do one. And this was approved as kind of one acceptable pathway. So my vote for this was yes. The vote was 111 to 16, so it did receive substantial unanimity, and it did pass 87.4%. And I did just note on this one a minority opinion that I thought was kind of poignant. It said the person who offered the minority opinion indicated that Bill begs us to never reorganize our boards except in very rare instances. If we have a process in place, it is only a matter of time until it gets used. This does become an advisory action, and I just thought it was interesting to note what that minority opinion was. Okay, the next recommendation came from the Trustees Committee Literature F item, which was distributed to the Trustees Committee through the equitable distribution of workload, and it normally would have been through the Literature Committee, but was reassigned to the Trustees Committee prior to the conference. So what the committee considered was a request to revisit highlighting service roles at the group level in the pamphlet, the AA group. The committee decided to take no action, and the committee discussed this in full and discussed that the role and attitude of humility of our trusted servants, and acknowledged that phrases like holding office or officer are used in several sections of the pamphlet, not just in the service role section, and have an equivalent meaning to being a trusted servant. This was an item that we talked about in our conference assembly. We did do a poll on it, and the poll was asking if there was support for revising that text highlighting service roles, and we did receive just a little bit less than substantial unanimity of that. Between our in-person voters and online, we had 62% in favor, and we had 38% that were not in favor of that. So at our area level, that would not have passed the substantial unanimity test. I'm just bringing that up. Obviously, a committee consideration was not voted on by the full conference, and this item was in our delegates questionnaire, and between the groups that voted on that one, and discussed it fully in their groups. We did receive substantial unanimity to have that text revised. And the final item for which the Trustees Committee had a recommendation was also from Equitable Distribution of Workload from the Literature Committee. And this was a request to revise the pamphlet, Do You Think You're Different? And to update the stories to provide the better representation of the diversity within our fellowship, and then to bring back a draft pamphlet or progress report to the 2023 General Service Conference. So as you can see from that pie chart, this was included in our delegates questionnaire of our groups, and our groups did with just a little bit over 71% agree with this and approve of doing this by substantial unanimity. So when the vote came, I voted yes. The overall vote of the conference was at 110 yes votes and 13 no votes. It did pass with substantial unanimity. There were a couple other items that were committee considerations that the committee indicated on this particular pamphlet. The first of which was they recommended looking at the accuracy and effectiveness of direct translations, resulting in an ineffective presentation to linguistic community. So they wanted to make sure what that really is saying is that when we translate, that we're having an authentic and culturally relevant message to the AA members to whom we are translating for. And then secondly, the committee requested that the AA Grapevine Board consider using Do You Think You Are Different as a recurring theme. And this was recommended to allow for the presentation of a diverse group of current voices and finding a common identification, which is what we do in AA. And then finally, there was another committee consideration in that the committee discussed a thread-based forums to allow better communication throughout the conference structure, and is forwarding a summary to the trustees nominating committee. Personally, I look forward to more information on that because that is an item for which I do not have a lot of expertise. If you have any questions on the 72nd General Service Conference or the work of the Trustees Committee at the 72nd General Service Conference, please feel free to contact me at p72delegate@area50wny.org. And finally, I wish to thank you for the opportunity to serve Area 50 and AA as a whole.